Welcome to Now in the 90s, where we look at the game releases of 30 years ago today. This week, a tie-in game of a show that you forgot existed, a Sega CD upgrade, and Luigi finally gets his own game. Hi, I'm your host Jared, and today is Editor Dylan's birthday, June 30th, 1993. Not the spin-off we wanted, or anyone wanted, released this week in June 1993, was Mario is Missing for the NES and Super Nintendo. Mario is Missing is an educational game. Mario is kidnapped by Bowser and his Koopa kids. It's up to Luigi and Yoshi to rescue him, which he does by traveling the real world. Stomp on Koopa Troopas to collect clues and talk to locals to learn real history facts. Then someone who looks strikingly like Princess Peach gives a quiz proving you've learned something to collect an artifact to help you find Mario. Mario is Missing was developed by the Software Toolworks, who is best known for making educational software like Mavis Beacon Teaches Typing for PC and the Miracle Piano teaching system for both NES and SNES. The NES version was ported by Radical Entertainment, who would go on to make games like The Simpsons Hit and Run and Prototype. To be clear, this was a Mario game, well, Luigi game, that was not made by Nintendo. It's the early 90s, and Nintendo was looking to branch out their brand reach and get more games. As such, Nintendo, uncharacteristically, licensed out their IPs to other companies and allowed them to make games using their franchises. There's some pretty infamous examples of this, but we'll get to those later this year. Nintendo licensed out Mario to Software Toolworks after seeing the success of other edutainment games, particularly Carmen Sandiego. Thus, the gameplay is very similar, with Luigi visiting many world landmarks and giving out some basic trivia for every location. The NES and Super Nintendo versions reused assets from Super Mario World, making it a very quick and cheap development cycle. Although, Mario is Missing first released in January 1993 when the home PC versions released. Those look very different. It's where that one unsettling meme image of Luigi comes from. It's also more of a typical point-and-click interface, whereas the home console versions at least had some semblance of platforming. Still, it had the name Mario attached to it, so it couldn't go ignored. Nintendo Power gave a page-and-a-half overview in issue 50, talking about edutainment games as a whole, and making it very clear Mario is Missing is nothing like Mario World. Please don't buy it and complain to us after. It also got reviews, surprisingly. Nintendo Power was the kindest, giving it an average score of a 2.7 out of 5. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave some surprisingly high grades, aside from one guy pointing out that it's a dull edutainment game regardless. Mario is Missing would get a sequel of sorts. Mario's Time Machine would release a mere 6 months later in December 1993. So we'll see you on the show soon. Speaking of well-known franchises getting surprising video games, also released this month in 1993 was the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles for the NES. Young Indiana Jones Chronicles is a side-scrolling action game. Play as a young Indiana Jones, archaeologist and pugilist extraordinaire, traveling the world to stop evildoers from stealing precious artifacts. Use Indy's whip to take out enemies and collect all kinds of power-ups, such as his iconic hat, throwing knives, or different guns. Defeat enemies at the end of levels, watch a cutscene, and then move on to the next stage. Now, in the 90s, there was an Indiana Jones television series. Young Indiana Jones Chronicles stars Sean Patrick Flannery as a young Indiana Jones, but also it did have one episode where Harrison Ford shows up as Indiana Jones before flashing back to his younger self. The show, which was created by George Lucas, lasted 2 seasons, but also had 4 additional made-for-TV movies which would continue to air throughout the mid-90s. Then all the episodes and movies were re-edited into 22 individual movies now titled The Adventures of Young Indiana Jones in 1999. There was Indiana Jones throughout all of the 90s. The NES had a few Indiana Jones games already, and another one trying to tie into a new official television series would be a perfect opportunity. The Young Indiana Jones game was developed by Chris Gray Enterprises, aka Gray Matter Studios, aka the same team that also made that Bob game from a couple of weeks back. It was published by Jaleco, a company that released several NES and SNES titles that I would describe all of them as fine. Same goes for this game. It doesn't do anything particularly great, but it also isn't awful in any way. The television show didn't do particularly well. It never got a sustained enough audience to really last. Since TV watchers weren't excited about the show, there were even less people excited for the NES game. It got little to no marketing. We couldn't find any kind of television commercial or magazine advertisement for the game. Nintendo didn't even give it any kind of coverage. They did review it in issue 44, which had it originally slated for a January 1993 release, and they scored it with an average score of a 2.9 out of 5. GamePro magazine also reviewed it, essentially saying it wasn't much to look at or listen to, but it was fun to play. Shockingly, this isn't the only Young Indiana Jones game. There would be another one called Instruments of Chaos for the Sega Genesis in 1994, which is also worse than this game in every single way. Somewhat related, the Sega CD got a newish game this week. Released in June 1993 was The Amazing Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin. Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin is a side-scrolling action game where you play as Spider-Man. Run, jump, and wall crawl your way through a variety of levels. There's even a couple of places where you can crawl in the background. Use Spidey's web to swing or stun enemies, giving you a chance to punch them right in the junk. Defeat bosses at the end of levels, and then finally the Kingpin to rescue his girlfriend Mary Jane with multiple endings. The Amazing Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin for the Sega CD is an updated port of the Sega Genesis game Spider-Man. The original game was developed by Technopop, and the Sega CD upgrade was also done by them. This gave them an opportunity to do a bunch of upgrades they thought their original game could use. The Sega CD version has faster gameplay, more attacks that Spider-Man can use, and you can choose to do the levels in any order thanks to a world map of sorts. More bosses were added, passwords let you pick up where you left off, and you now have infinite continues. There's also the usual Sega CD upgrades. The soundtrack now boasts CD quality music. You can find 21 digital versions of Spider-Man comics, and perhaps the biggest inclusion is all new animated cutscenes. The beginning of the game, the ending, and particular moments like before boss fights have fully animated, fully voiced cutscenes that aren't too bad for the time. This was incredibly exciting to see at the time, since the very popular 90s Spider-Man animated series would not air until late 1994. This was the first time we got to see a new Spider-Man cartoon in the 90s. And not just a cartoon that our parents watched when they were younger. The animated sections were done thanks to Gray Matter Inc., the same studio that did the Young Indiana Jones game and that Bob game we just talked about. Wow, they have been busy this year. Not only that, the new rock and music was composed by Eric Martin of the band Mr. Big. This music collaboration was a big enough deal that it became a bullet point for magazine advertisements. The band Mr. Big just had some pretty big hits with 1992's To Be With You. And for all of you who are currently opening up a new tab to search that and give it a listen, go ahead, we'll wait. The song still rocks. Magazines reviewed the game quite favorably. UK gaming magazine Hyper reviewed it with a 73%, and GamePro magazine rated it with incredibly high scores in every category. Also looking to be with you for everything else released this week, here's Editor Dylan.
Spider-Man also got a portable release this week with Spider-Man 3: Invasion of the Spider Slayers. It's your typical spider scroller with all your iconic spider villains. You got your Techno, you got your pointy green tail man, you got your Xenomorph, you got your Silver Surfer. Hang on, what was that last one? You got your Xenomorph. I must have missed that crossover. The Spider Slayers first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man issue 368, which released less than a year before this game came out and released a year after Alien 3 came out. Coincidence? Well, according to their lawyers, yes, it's purely a coincidence. No further investigation necessary. But I don't buy it. How could LJN get away with using a Xenomorph in their Spider-Man game? Like, who had the rights to make Alien games at the time? Oh. Well, that would explain it. Maybe that was all common knowledge and I'm just not that into superhero stuff. In fact, the last live-action Spider-Man movie I saw was the one with Black Tar Eric Foreman, and I didn't even finish it. The moment Toby started snapping his fingers, I walked out and just played Hydro Thunder in the lobby for an hour. It was a good time. I love Hydro Thunder. What was I talking about? Can you tell I have ADHD? Kawasaki Caribbean Challenge is a ninja racing game for the SNES. It's not as cool as it sounds. Race your ninja rights reserved motorcycle around the Caribbean to the dulcet tones of Kawasaki engineering. Listen to that vehicular symphony. Or you could switch gears and hop onto a Kawasaki branded jet ski for an even catchier tune. Can you tell I'm being facetious? In all fairness, cars are a dime a dozen in the video game industry, so it's kind of refreshing to race with something that doesn't have four wheels for a change. Let's face it, the only thing that improves car games is if they're decked out with a bunch of guns. Can you tell I'm American? Battle Wheels for the Lynx did a Twisted Metal 2 years before Twisted Metal did a Twisted Metal. The show hasn't always been the kindest to the Atari handheld. Jared talked about one Lynx game to date, and I've only had positive reactions to like 2.5 of them. So believe me when I tell you, this is the best damn Lynx game I've played for this show. Better than Dracula the Undead, and I love that one. Graphics, top notch. Gameplay, buttery smooth. Frame rate, silky smooth. Music. Well, that's subjective. Sound effects, chunky and satisfying. Premise, badass, dude. Try to visualize, okay? You're in the post-apocalyptic, far-off future of 2019. You're a road warrior who enters a tournament where you murder people with your death DeLorean. Rights reserved. Customize your car with explosives and firearms while you upgrade your defenses and performance. But when your car's destroyed, it's game over. Psych! You then run around on foot, still shooting and stomping your way to find a car to steal and get back in the action. What? Twisted Metal didn't even do that. You can run over drivers as they're ejected outside of their vehicle. You have a working rear view mirror so you can blow up anybody stupid enough to challenge you. But you know what the craziest thing about this 1993 portable game is? 6-person multiplayer. Can you tell I like this game? The only complaint GamePro had about Battle Wheels was the lack of replayability, and all 16 levels look nearly identical, which may be true, but the next time I go to a convention, probably this one, and I see Battle Wheels for sale, you're damn skippy I'm gonna pick it up, and I don't even have a Lynx. And I've never used the term damn skippy, did I say that right? So to these 7 games released on these 5 consoles this week in 1993, I say happy 30th birthday. And if you share a birthday with these games like I do, then happy birthday to you as well. Here's some random Steam codes for the occasion. I think there's like 30 of them in this video. Happy hunting, and have a wonderful summer.
Thanks, Dylan. Here in the Collector's Corner, Mario is Missing isn't very desired. The SNES version released costing $64.95, quite a bit for an educational game, and now it's only worth $15, and the complete in box one is only worth $60. However, the NES version is much more uncommon, currently worth $33 and $135 for a complete one. Spider-Man for Sega CD is hardly amazing. A loose disc is worth $22, and the complete in box copy is worth a flat $50. This week's biggest value gainer is Young Indiana Jones. Just the game alone is currently worth $90, and if you find the box and manual from a museum somewhere, it goes up to $260. And that's it for today. Next week, like father, like son, you're always number one, a cult classic RPG for Sega, and an incredibly valuable SNES RPG. I'm your host, Jared, and this was Now in the 90s. Thank you so much for watching Now in the 90s. I want to thank some patrons like Alcahest, Super Bunny Bun, and Skizzy. Please like the video and leave a comment down below, especially if you played any of the games this week, and subscribe if you haven't already. If you already are a subscriber, thank you so much for watching this show every single Friday. And if you want to help support us, please consider checking out our Patreon. Link is in the description down below. I told the story before, but I actually can tell you exactly the first time I played Mario is Missing. I was at a friend's house, we were having a sleepover, and my mom rented some games for us to play all weekend. One of them was Star Fox, and the other one was Mario is Missing. Guess which one we played more? I was 8.